The sky was dark when the human ship broke apart. Fire streaked across the alien horizon, and the people of the land looked up as a trail of light fell into the mountains. From the wreck, only one human lived. His name was Jalen. When he opened his eyes, he was not surrounded by the familiar steel of his ship, but by strange voices, sharp and cold. Figures stood over him. They were tall, graceful, and strong. Their faces were beautiful but stern. Their eyes burned with something deeper than suspicion. It was hatred. They called themselves the HFY, and Jalen soon learned that his kind, humans, were not welcome here. To the HFY, humans were destroyers. They believed humans had once brought ruin to their people in a war long before Jalen was born. For them, he was not a man. He was a symbol of every wound they still carried. At first, Jalen thought they would kill him, but the HFY did not waste life easily. They kept him alive, though not free. He was taken to a walled compound of stone and iron where guards watched him day and night. He was given food, but no kindness. Every word spoken to him was filled with contempt. In the beginning, he fought back with anger. He shouted that he was innocent, that he had done nothing, that he was only a crewman, a victim of an accident. But his words were useless. The HFY had already decided what he was. They called him the human, never his name. They laughed at his weakness and reminded him of every crime their records claimed his kind had done. Jalen learned silence. He swallowed his protests and kept his anger inside. When they pushed him, he stood firm. When they mocked him, he looked away. He waited and listened. Over time, he began to notice things. The HFY who guarded him wore marks of grief. Broken pendants, scarred armor, faded ribbons tied to their weapons. He realized these were reminders of family members lost to war. Hatred was not just in their laws. It lived in their memories. The days became years. Jalen survived by making himself useful in small ways. He fixed broken tools when they threw them aside in frustration. He repaired a cracked water pipe in his cell with only cloth and stone. The HFY were surprised. They knew humans were clever with machines, but they had forgotten how simple skills could save a day. Some of them began to study him as if he were an object. Scholars came to ask questions about his ship, his tools, his body. They never asked about his heart or his dreams. To them, those things did not matter. But Jalen still listened to their talk, collecting scraps of their history and their pain. One evening, he was taken to a vast chamber deep below the city. It was the archive, a hall filled with old records, maps, and artifacts. A stern HFY archivist placed an object before him. Dust covered it, but Jalen knew it at once. It was a piece of human technology. His breath caught when he saw the faint letters etched into the metal. It was the name of his captain. The archivist's voice was cold as she explained. This object was taken from the ruins of a battle decades earlier. To the HFY, it was proof that humans were murderers. But to Jalen, it was proof of something else. The past that bound him here was more complicated than they admitted. His captain had fought here, yes, but why? And why had the HFY kept this artifact hidden? That night, lying on the hard floor of his cell, Jalen turned the memory of the artifact over and over in his mind. For the first time in 10 years, he felt more than fear or anger. He felt curiosity, and with it, a dangerous hope. If he could learn the truth of that artifact, maybe he could change something. Maybe he could show them that one man was not the weight of an entire people, or maybe he would only dig deeper into their hatred. He did not know. But he could not ignore the chance. The stars outside his narrow window glimmered cold and distant. Jalen whispered his own name softly, reminding himself of who he was, not what they called him. 10 years of silence had not broken him. He was still alive, and as long as he breathed, the story was not finished. And far away in the great archive, the artifact with his captain's name waited, holding secrets that could either save him or doom him forever. The seasons changed, but Jalen remained within the walls of the HFY compound. Every day felt the same. Silence, watchful eyes, and the weight of being alone among those who despised him. Yet things shifted when Mara appeared. Mara was different from the other guards. She was younger, but her posture was straight, her steps sharp, her eyes sharp with discipline. She was assigned as his monitor, though she made it clear from the beginning that she was no friend. "Do as you are told, human," she said in the common tongue they had forced him to learn. "You will work. You will not complain." At first, Jalen thought she was another cruel overseer, but he soon realized Mara was not cruel for pleasure. She was strict, yes, but curious. She wanted to see how a human behaved when pushed, how much truth lay in the records of her people's history. His first tasks were small. He was ordered to repair a cracked relay used in the training yard. The device buzzed and sparked, and the Scifi technicians had abandoned it, calling it useless. With nothing but scraps, Jalen managed to make it hum again. Mara watched him carefully, her eyes narrowing not with anger but with thought. Later, she placed before him broken tools, old devices, even fragments of his own crashed ship. Each time he worked with patience, using skill learned long ago on long freighter voyages. He tied wires together, smoothed edges, and found ways to make dead things breathe once more. Slowly, the Scifi who watched began to whisper that the human was clever. Mara pushed further. She gave him pieces of their archive to translate, fragments written in ancient trade language. Jalen had learned enough of their words by then to attempt the work. Long hours passed as he pieced together broken sentences, matching them with human terms. Through this task, he began to see their history more clearly, and their pain. The records spoke of battles, betrayals, and burned cities. They spoke of human raiders who once stormed Scifi colonies, families torn apart, lives stolen. Jalen read the words and felt the heavy weight of their memory pressing on him. He wanted to protest, to say, "It was not me, it was not all of us." But he held his tongue. He knew the truth was more tangled than one side's version. At night, when he was returned to his small quarters, Jalen whispered the words he had read, committing them to memory. The more he learned, the more he saw cracks in the story. Some records did not match. Some battles were told in different ways by different writers. There were gaps, missing pieces that no one spoke of. The turning point came one stormy evening. The city was hit by violent winds, and one of the life support pumps that carried air into the lower quarters failed. Panic spread among the workers, who could not repair it in time. Mara dragged Jalen there, a test in her eyes. "If you are truly useful," she said, "save them." The pump was large, alien in design, but Jalen understood the rhythm of machines. He worked with bare hands, metal dust stinging his skin, while the storm raged above. The crowd watched, ready to condemn him if he failed. With a desperate pull and a makeshift patch, the machine roared back to life. Air flowed again, and the people gasped with relief. For the first time, Jalen saw more than hatred in their eyes. Some looked at him with respect, some even with gratitude. But it was a dangerous kind of respect, for it drew new attention to him. That night, in the shadows of the council chamber, voices argued. Some Scifi elders whispered that the human could be of value. Others, harder and colder, demanded he be used. "If he lives," one said, "then he must serve our purpose. Perhaps he can bring more of his kind to us. Perhaps we can use him as a tool." Jalen did not hear those words directly, but he felt their weight the next day when Mara returned with tighter orders and sharper questions. Something had changed. His act of saving lives had earned him something, but not freedom. Instead, he had become more important to their plans. As he lay awake, listening to the distant rumble of the storm fading over the mountains, Jalen understood a hard truth. The Scifi would never simply forget their hatred. They might accept his skill, they might use his hands, but they would never see him as equal unless something deeper changed. Yet he also knew this. Each task, each repair, each moment of proving himself gave him more than survival. It gave him fragments of trust, threads he might one day weave into something greater. He would not give them all his secrets, but he would not stop learning theirs. Far above, the stars shone unseen through the storm. Somewhere out there, humanity still lived, but Jalen was alone here. Alone, and slowly becoming part of a story larger than himself. But as he closed his eyes, he remembered the whisper he had overheard that morning. A guard, careless with words, had spoken of the elders' plan. They wanted to use him to lure other humans, to draw them into Scifi hands. The thought chilled him. He was no longer just a prisoner. He was becoming bait. The compound felt different after the storm. Jalen sensed it in the way guards whispered when he passed and in how some avoided his eyes. Saving the lower quarters had not freed him. It had only pushed him deeper into their world. Mara still watched him closely, but even she seemed unsettled. Her voice was sharp as ever, but she did not insult him as often. Instead, she asked questions about the ship he once served on, about how humans thought during war, about why he never tried to escape. Jalen answered carefully, never giving too much but enough to key. At her talking, Through her, he learned that the Sci-Fi Council was divided. Some believed Jalen should be used as bait, a symbol to lure more humans into their hands. Others argued that he was dangerous, a seed of corruption. And a few whispered that perhaps they had been wrong to hate all humans without question. Jalen saw his chance. He began speaking to individuals quietly, whenever Mara allowed him into the archive or escorted him through the market square. He did not plead for his freedom. Instead, he listened. He asked simple questions, and when they answered, he responded with small truths. A medic once asked him, "Why did you risk your life to fix the pump?" "You could have let us die," Jalen said, "because life is life. Human or Sci-Fi, a child still breathes the same." The medic said nothing, but days later slipped him an extra piece of bread. An elder scribe asked him why humans had killed so many Sci-Fi centuries ago. Jalen did not deny it. He said, "Humans have killers, so do you. But that does not mean every one of us is the same." The elder frowned, but his eyes softened with doubt. Piece by piece, Jalen built fragile threads of trust. And then he discovered something shocking. While working in the archive under Mara's watch, he noticed a record sealed away in a private section. It was damaged, edges burned, but enough words remained for him to understand. The massacre the Sci-Fi hated humans for had not been led by humanity as a whole. It was the work of one warlord, a rogue captain who had acted without the sanction of any human government. Yet the records the Sci-Fi taught their children had erased this detail, blaming every human for the crime. Jalen's chest burned as he read. For 10 years he had carried their hatred in silence, believing perhaps his people truly had been guilty of a great evil. Now he knew the truth was more tangled. The pain of the Sci-Fi was real, but their leaders had twisted the story. He wanted to shout it, to tell everyone at once. But Mara pulled the record from his hands. Her jaw tightened as if she too had glimpsed the truth, but she said nothing. "You have seen enough," she ordered, leading him back to his cell. That night, Jalen made his decision. If he stayed silent, the lie would live forever. If he spoke, he could die, but he could not carry the truth alone. The next day, during his work in the market, he found his chance. Standing on a crate, he raised his voice and spoke the words he had read. He told the crowd that not all humans had been killers, that their history had been twisted by those who wanted endless hate. He described the record he had seen. The details that proved the massacre was the act of one rogue, not an entire species. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in anger, calling him a liar. Others gasped in disbelief. Whispers spread like fire. The guards tried to silence him, but the words had already flown from mouth to mouth. Mara dragged him away before the mob could tear him apart. In her eyes burned both fury and confusion. "Do you know what you have done?" she demanded. "I told the truth," Jalen answered simply. That night the city trembled with unrest. Some Sci-Fi stormed the council chambers demanding answers. Others armed themselves, refusing to believe the humans' words. The unity of hate that had bound them for generations was breaking. But before Jalen could see what would come of it, the sky burned once more. Sirens wailed through the city as lights flared over the horizon. Ships descended. Not Sci-Fi ships, not human ships, but vessels marked with the cold insignia of slavers. The slavers' message thundered through the commnet. Their leader's voice was harsh and cruel. "Give us the human and we will spare your city. Refuse and we will take him and then Morse by force." The council froze in fear. The streets filled with panic, and Jalen, standing at his cell window, understood the danger he now faced. He had been hated. He had been used, and now he had become something worse. A prize hunted by enemies far beyond the Sci-Fi walls. The storm of truth had torn the Sci-Fi apart, and now an outside storm was coming to claim him. The slaver ships hung above the city like dark birds waiting to strike. Their engines roared, their weapons glimmered, and every Sci-Fi knew the threat was real. The council gathered in haste, their voices trembling between rage and fear. Some shouted that Jalen must be handed over at once to save the city. Others argued that giving in would only invite more demands. Jalen listened from behind guarded walls, his heart heavy. He had been hated by the Sci-Fi for years, and now strangers from the stars wanted him too. He could almost laugh at the cruelty of it. But he knew this was not only about him. If the slavers won here, the Sci-Fi people would suffer. When Mara came to see him, her expression was troubled. She did not insult him this time. Instead, she asked quietly, "If they come for you, what will you do?" Jalen shook his head. "If they take me, they won't stop with me. They'll take others. Your people will pay, not just me. Mara studied him for a long moment. She seemed to weigh his words, then nodded once. Then you must show us how to fight them. Her words surprised him. For 10 years, Jalen had been seen as a prisoner, never as someone to trust in war. But now, desperation left no other choice. That evening, the council called Jalen before them. The hall was tense, filled with voices demanding his fate. One elder snarled, "You are the cause of this danger. Why should we listen to you?" Jalen stood tall. He was tired of being silent, tired of bending his head. His voice carried steady across the chamber. "Because I know how they think. Slavers prey on fear. They want you to give up without a fight. If you resist, if you make them pay a price, they will retreat. Humans always speak of war," another elder spat. "Not war," Jalen replied firmly. "Survival. You want your children to live? Then you need every hand that can hold a tool or a weapon. I can show you how." The hall erupted in argument. Some wanted to throw him to the slavers anyway, but others began to listen. His words were simple, and they carried a truth that could not be denied. At last, the ruler spoke. "Very well. The human will help. If he betrays us, he will die first." That night, Jalen walked free of his cell for the first time in 10 years. Guards still watched him, but now he was not just a prisoner. He was a man preparing for battle. He worked quickly, turning scrap metal into traps, broken machines into weapons, and abandoned tunnels into escape routes. He showed the Scifi how to set decoys, how to strike fast and vanish, how to confuse an enemy stronger than you. Some laughed at his crude methods, but when his traps caught drones sent by the slavers, the laughter stopped. Slowly, grudgingly, the Scifi began to trust his guidance. Mara fought beside him, her sharp voice now carrying orders shaped by his advice. A medic he had once spoken to volunteered to help carry supplies. Even children joined in, hiding food in secret tunnels. The city was alive with desperate energy. When the slavers finally struck, the night exploded with fire. Their ships rained metal soldiers onto the streets, machines with cold, glowing eyes. The Scifi fought with spears and rifles, but it was Jalen's tricks that turned the tide. Explosive charges hidden in alleys, smoke bombs that blinded machines. Water lines burst to flood pathways. Every trick slowed the enemy. Jalen himself fought too, not as a soldier but as a builder of chaos. He darted through shadows, setting traps, calling warnings, saving those who stumbled. At one point he dragged a wounded child from the rubble, shielding them with his own body as blasts tore the ground around them. The battle lasted until dawn. By then the streets were scarred, the buildings cracked, and the air filled with smoke. But the slavers withdrew. They had lost more than they expected and left behind their dead machines. The city had survived. As the sun rose, the people gathered in silence. For the first time in 10 years, they looked at Jalen not with hatred but with something else: gratitude, respect, even hope. But the price had been high. Many Scifi had fallen. Families wept in the streets. And though the slavers were gone, their warning still echoed in the minds of all. The galaxy is watching. If another conflict came, humans would be blamed. Mara found Jalen in the ruins of the square. Her armor was cracked, her face bruised, but her eyes steady. She looked at him as if trying to understand something larger than words. "I thought you would run," she said. Jalen met her gaze. "I thought about it, but I couldn't. Not when people needed me." She was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke words he never expected. "Perhaps we have been wrong about you." Her voice lowered, almost unsure. "Perhaps we have been wrong about humans." Jalen felt something stir inside him. Not victory, not freedom, but the fragile spark of change. The battle had ended, but a new war was beginning. Not with weapons, but with truth. And he knew it would be harder than any fight with slavers. The city was quiet after the battle, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of people rebuilding, carrying grief and wondering what would come next. Broken walls were patched with stone and metal, fires were put out, and families searched for their missing. Everywhere Jalen walked, eyes followed him. No longer filled with only hate, their looks now carried something new: confusion, respect, and questions that had no easy answers. The council did not know what to do with him. He had saved lives, but he was still human, the old enemy. After long debate, they gave him limited freedom under Mara's watch. He was no longer locked in a cell, but he was not trusted to wander without purpose. One morning, Mara came to him with an unexpected order. "The council wants you to teach," she said. Jalen frowned.
Teach what?
"Small things," she explained. "Craft, repair, whatever you know. They think our people might learn from you. Do not think this means they trust you. They only wish to test you further." Still, Jalen agreed. If teaching could open minds, he would try. The first gathering was small. A handful of workers, a medic, and 2 young apprentices sat in front of him. Their expressions were guarded, their arms crossed, but they listened. Jalen began simply. He showed them how to use scraps of wire and cloth to make a broken lamp glow again. He told them how humans often fixed ships in deep space with nothing but what they carried in their pockets. At first, they only watched. Then one of the apprentices leaned forward and tried to copy his work. The lamp flickered weakly, and when it lit, the group murmured in surprise. For the first time in years, Jalen smiled in front of them. The next day, more people came. Soon the lessons grew into small workshops. Jalen taught how to seal leaks with simple paste, how to bind wood and stone with pressure, how to use steam for power when fuel was scarce. He did not give them great weapons or dangerous secrets, only skills for survival. But he also taught through stories. While showing them how to bind wires, he told a tale of a mechanic back on Earth who once kept a whole crew alive with only duct tape and a stubborn heart. When they asked him why, he said, "Because humans believe problems have answers, even when the answers are ugly." At first, the Sci-Fi students laughed at his strange examples, but slowly they began to share their own. A worker told a story about repairing a roof during a storm with nothing but rope and courage. A medic spoke of saving a child with herbs when no healer was near. Through stories, they began to see that survival and hope were not so different between their peoples. Yet not everyone accepted this change. A group of extremists angry at the council grew louder. They claimed Jalen was poisoning the city with lies. They shouted in the markets that the human was softening their spirit, that his tricks would weaken them, that his words were dangerous. One night, Jalen's workshop was broken into. Tools were smashed, his notes torn, and a warning painted on the wall. "You do not belong here." Mara found him cleaning the wreckage. Her face was hard, but her voice was low. "Do not stop," she said. "They want fear. Do not give it to them." So Jalen continued. Day after day, more people came. Not because they trusted him fully, but because they wanted to see if there was truth in what he offered. And slowly, the line between teacher and prisoner began to blur. The turning point came when the ruler herself summoned him. The grand hall was filled with citizens, counselors, and soldiers. Jalen stood at the center, feeling their eyes upon him. The ruler's voice rang out. "You are human," she said. "Our history tells us your kind brought only death. Yet you saved lives here. You teach. You speak of honor. Tell me, are you a spy or are you an emissary of peace? What is your true purpose among us?" The hall fell into silence. Jalen could feel the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. Every word he spoke would echo in their memories. He took a breath and answered, not with grand speeches, but with something simple. "I am only one man. I cannot change the past. I cannot speak for every human. But I can tell you this, when I see someone in danger, I cannot turn away. That is not strategy. That is not a plan. That is who I am. Maybe that is what humans are. Not perfect, but people who keep trying to help even when it costs them." The ruler studied him for a long time. Around the hall, whispers rose, some doubtful, some thoughtful. In that moment, Jalen did not know if he had saved himself or doomed himself. But he had spoken truth, and for the first time, he felt no chains on his voice. The decision of the council would come later, but already he could see in some faces a small shift, doubt cracking the stone of hatred, and curiosity breaking through fear. And as the crowd dispersed, Mara approached him. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes no longer carried only suspicion. "You speak like a fool," she said, though her tone was softer than ever before. "But perhaps the kind of fool who changes things." Jalen said nothing, but inside a fragile hope grew. The city was changing, and so was he. The days after the council's questioning were tense. Rumors spread quickly through the streets. Some said Jalen would be executed for daring to speak. Others whispered that the ruler was moved by his words. For the first time since his capture, the people seemed divided, not in their hate but in their thoughts. Mara stayed close to him, watching carefully. She did not admit it, but she was curious about him. She had fought humans in the past, and her heart carried scars from those memories. Yet when she saw how Jalen worked, taught, and repaired, she could not ignore that he was different from the monster she had been taught to expect. One evening, while the sun set behind the jagged mountains, she found him repairing a broken water pump outside the city gates. "Why do you keep working?" she asked. "The council has not even decided if you will live." Jalen looked up, sweat on his face and dirt on his hands. "Because people need water," he said simply, "and because I cannot sit still and wait for someone else to decide my fate." Mara said nothing, but for the first time, she stayed to help. Together, they fixed the pump. The water rushed through the pipes again, and a small group of citizens clapped in relief. Jalen noticed that even in the shadows, some still looked at him with distrust, but fewer than before. That night, the council met again. Behind closed doors, voices rose in argument. Some demanded that Jalen be banished to the wildlands, where beasts and storms would finish him. Others argued that his skills were too valuable, that killing him would be wasteful. The ruler listened to them all in silence, her eyes sharp. Finally, she declared, "We will not kill him. We will give him a trial of honor. Let deeds, not words, decide." The trial was announced the next morning. The whole city gathered in the arena, a massive circle of stone. It was not a fight to the death, but a test. Jalen would be given a task that measured courage, skill, and loyalty. If he succeeded, he would be allowed to live freely among them. If he failed, the council would decide his punishment. When Jalen entered the arena, the air was heavy with expectation. Mara walked beside him, her voice low. "This is not fair," she muttered. "They will set you against something impossible." Jalen gave a tired smile. "Then I'll do the impossible." The task was revealed. He had to cross the desert outside the city and bring back a rare plant called flame root. The plant grew only in dangerous lands filled with predators and violent storms. No outsider had ever survived the journey. The crowd murmured, some pleased, some concerned. Jalen simply nodded. "I'll go." The next day he left the city with only a small pack of supplies. Mara walked with him to the edge of the gates. She handed him a blade of local steel, light but sharp. "Take this," she said. "It may not be enough, but at least you won't face the wild empty-handed." Their eyes met for a brief moment. Neither spoke of trust or friendship, but something unspoken passed between them. Then Jalen turned and walked into the desert. The journey was brutal. Heat pressed down during the day and freezing winds cut at night. His body ached, his throat burned, and every step felt heavier than the last. Strange creatures stalked him from the dunes, long-bodied hunters with sharp teeth and silent movements. Jalen fought them with the blade, his human strength and stubborn will keeping him alive. On the third day, a storm struck. Sand filled the sky, turning day into night. Jalen covered his face and pushed forward, guided only by instinct. When the storm cleared, he saw the glow of flame root blooming near the rocks, a plant of bright red pulsing with heat. But as he reached for it, another predator struck. A massive beast, scales black as coal and eyes burning yellow, rose from the sand. Jalen barely had time to react. He slashed with his blade, rolled aside, and used the rocks for cover. The fight was desperate, every movement costing him more strength. At last, he drove the blade deep into the beast's side. It roared and collapsed, the desert trembling beneath it. Jalen fell to his knees, gasping. With bloodied hands, he pulled the flame root from the earth and held it close. The journey back was even harder, but he refused to give up. Step by step, hour by hour, he carried the flame root across the endless dunes. When he finally reached the city gates, his body was weak, but his spirit unbroken. The crowd gasped when they saw him return alive. Dust covered his body, wounds marked his skin, but in his hand was the glowing flame root. He placed it at the feet of the ruler and said, voice hoarse but steady, "You asked for proof. Here it is." The arena fell silent. The ruler stood, her eyes locked on him. Then slowly she raised her hand. "This man has proven his courage. He has shown honor, strength, and will. From this day forward, he will no longer be a prisoner. He will live among us as one of our people." The cheers were not unanimous, but they were loud enough to shake the stones. Jalen looked around, and for the first time, he saw not just suspicion in their eyes, but respect. Mara stepped to his side, her voice low but certain. "You did the impossible." Jalen gave her a weary smile. "No," he said. "I just did what had to be done." And though the future was uncertain, in that moment he knew the chains of hate had begun to break. The city was alive with cautious hope. After the trial and the return of the flame root, the people of the Scifi had begun to see Jalen not as a prisoner or a symbol of their hatred, but as a man. Human, yes, but capable of courage and honor. Still, not all hearts had changed. Extremists whispered in the alleys, plotting revenge, unwilling to accept the shift in perspective. Jalen moved among the streets carefully, teaching and repairing, always alert. Mara walked beside him, her armor dented but her spirit strong. Together they continued to show the citizens small ways to survive, thrive, and protect themselves. But the tension of what had yet to come hung in the air like a storm cloud. One morning the council convened urgently. Word had come that the extremists were preparing a coup, planning to seize the palace and overthrow the ruler. If they succeeded, Jalen would be blamed, and all the progress he had made would vanish in a wave of violence. Mara turned to him. "They will not wait. We must act now," Jalen nodded. For 10 years he had been hunted, hated, and tested. Now for the first time he could fight not just to survive, but to protect those who had begun to trust him. The palace gates were reinforced, streets barricaded, and loyal citizens called to defend their homes. Jalen moved among them, sharing simple human strategies, ways to slow the enemy, to anticipate attacks, to use their knowledge of the city to their advantage. Mara led the Scifi soldiers while he guided the civilians, teaching them courage through small actions. When the coup began, the extremists stormed the palace with weapons in hand and fire in their hearts. But the city was ready. Traps set by Jalen slowed their advance, and barricades funneled them into narrow streets where the defenders held the advantage. Jalen moved through the chaos like a shadow, alert to every cry for help, every dangerous moment. He pulled a child from the path of a falling beam, guided citizens through hidden passages, and coordinated the defense with Mara and her soldiers. Every step he took was careful, measured, and fearless. In the center of the palace, the ruler faced the extremist leaders. Words were shouted, threats made, but the humans and Scifi loyalists outside forced the insurgents to reconsider. They began to see that victory was no longer certain. Jalen realized that the coup would fail not because of brute force alone, but because the city itself refused to follow the extremists. Families, workers, and even some soldiers turned away from the chaos to protect their homes, their neighbors, and their children. The lesson was simple. Courage is contagious, and when people believe in more than hate, even the strongest enemy can be slowed. Hours later, the palace was secured. The extremists were captured, not destroyed, but restrained. Their power had been broken, their lies exposed. The ruler called a council immediately. "You have all witnessed what one human can do," she said, looking at Jalen. "Not through strength alone, not through cunning, but through courage, truth, and determination. Let this be a lesson. No one, no matter how small, is powerless when they choose to act." Jalen felt the weight of her words, and for the first time in years, he felt the warmth of belonging. Mara stood beside him, her eyes softened, her respect clear. She did not speak, but in her gaze was acknowledgement that he had changed them and perhaps even himself. Over the following days, the city began to rebuild again, this time with a new spirit. Citizens repaired homes together, shared food, and even listened to Jalen's lessons without suspicion. The council decreed that Scifi history would be rewritten to include the truth of the past, that humans had been both enemies and allies, capable of harm, but also of great bravery. Jalen chose to stay. He could have left, returned to the stars and the human worlds that might have missed him, but he felt a responsibility here. This city, these people had learned from him as much as he had learned from them. He could help ensure that the fragile trust they had built would not crumble. In the evenings, he walked through the markets, the children of Scifi following him eagerly, asking him to show simple tricks, to tell stories of Earth, of humanity, and of hope. He laughed with them, teaching them how to repair a small drone, how to make a lamp shine brighter, and how to keep calm when danger approached. And when he looked at the stars, he saw the same vast, cold space that had once thrown him into their world. But this time he felt not fear, but promise. The future was uncertain, yes, but also bright. Humans and Scifi were learning to understand each other, one small action at a time. Mara stood beside him one night, watching children chase each other across the courtyard. "You really did change things," she said quietly. Jalen smiled, tired but content. No, he said. We did it together. They had to see the choice themselves. I only helped them see it was possible. The city slept under a calm sky, the ruins of the past replaced by courage and hope. And far above, a faint signal from human space blinked across the stars. Jalen took a deep breath and spoke into the communicator, steady and brave. I am here, he said, and I will help however I can. The signal returned a faint reply, but it did not matter. Jalen knew that home was not only in the stars or on one planet, but in every heart that chose to act with courage. The city had survived. Hatred had cracked. And a human, once a prisoner, now stood not as a symbol of fear, but as a symbol of hope. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges. But for the first time in 10 years, Jalen believed in the possibility of a better future, for humans, for Sci-Fi, and for all who dared to reach across the divide.